Harley just shocked the entire market because the truth about what dealers actually pay for their bikes is finally out. A leaked set of internal cost sheets, marked confidential, has pulled the chrome off the numbers. These aren't rumors or forum guesses, they're the real invoices dealers see before you ever walk in. And the gap between that dealer cost and the price on the tag? It's thousands. For a brand built on loyalty and pride, that revelation hit like a backfire in a quiet garage. In this video, we're breaking down exactly what those sheets reveal and why riders everywhere feel betrayed. The leak that nobody saw coming. For decades, buyers have wondered what dealers truly paid for the machines lined up under showroom lights. Now the mystery was gone. The dealer cost sheets, stamped confidential, were suddenly public. Riders everywhere could finally see the raw truth. What shops pay, what Harley charges, and what gets passed to the loyal men and women who've kept the brand alive through recessions, wars, and bad winters. The numbers weren't speculation or rumor, they were printed proof. Some bikes that carried sticker prices pushing $30,000 had dealer costs closer to $22,000. The markup wasn't a few $100 for freight and prep. It was thousands layered quietly into the price. For the first time, Harley owners could see the game they'd been part of without knowing it. For older riders who built their lives around trust, it felt like a gut punch. This was the brand they defended in every garage debate, the badge they polished on Sunday mornings. To find out that the handshake had turned into a spreadsheet didn't just hurt their wallets, it bruised their pride. The shock wasn't about money alone, it was about honesty. And when word spread that dealers had been sitting on this kind of margin for years, the talk around the coffee counters turned sharp. Riders began asking the same question in different towns. If they'll hide that, what else are they hiding? The leak wasn't just a spreadsheet, it was a mirror held up to an entire system. But once you open those numbers, the whole system starts to look different. How Harley's price ladder really works. When the dust settled from the initial leak, riders began to dissect the structure itself, the ladder that connects the factory, the dealer, and the buyer. On paper, it looks simple. Harley sets a manufacturer's suggested retail price. The dealer buys below that figure, and the buyer pays what's listed on the tag. But inside that chain are hidden layers. Each one adds dollars before a rider even fires the ignition for the first time. Dealers pay an invoice amount that includes freight from the plant and a prep charge for uncrating and setup. That sounds fair until you realize those costs are often charged again to the customer as separate line items. Then comes documentation fees, service add-ons, and the ever-present market adjustment justified by demand or limited availability. It's a stacked pyramid, every layer a little thicker, every justification a little smoother. Explaining it feels like explaining a tool scam. It's like selling the same wrench 3 times before it hits your toolbox. The first sale is to the distributor, the second to the dealer, and the third to the man who actually needs to turn a bolt. Every level profits, but only one person does the work. Riders who grew up rebuilding carburetors and changing their own clutch cables see the insult immediately. That's why the leaked sheets hit so hard. They didn't just show prices, they showed structure. For years, Harley marketed itself as the brand that stood with the riders. But the numbers now showed a ladder built to climb above them. Even longtime service managers admitted privately that the system rewarded upsells over loyalty. And the deeper you look, the tighter that wrench turns. If you've been riding long enough to know when something doesn't add up, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment and tell me what you've seen out there, the stories that don't quite line up. The sticker shock math. Once the formulas came out, riders began running the numbers themselves. On a mid-range touring model listed at $27,999, the dealer's invoice came in near $20,800. Add freight, setup, and dock fees, and the margin still sat around $5,000 before accessories or financing commissions. That kind of markup wasn't unheard of in the car world, but for bikes, a market built on blue-collar pride, it felt excessive. The numbers told a clear story. Even entry-level models with a sticker under $20,000 could carry profits of $3,000 to $4,000. depending on location and demand. Those dollars didn't include the extended warranties, tire protection plans, or branded jackets pushed during closing. When riders compared those add-ons to online parts costs, the pattern became impossible to ignore. What stung most wasn't the existence of profit, it was the silence around it. Riders didn't mind a business earning fair money. They minded being treated like they wouldn't understand. Transparency could have built loyalty, secrecy built resentment. Forums filled with posts from veterans, truckers, and mechanics, people who'd worked for every dime they spent, asking why honesty had become a threat. That's where disbelief turned into understanding. Harley hadn't just been selling motorcycles, it had been selling image protection, a story priced at a premium. Now the curtain was gone, and the audience could see the stage lights and wires. The math no longer hid behind chrome or slogans. It was visible, provable, and impossible to spin. Those gaps aren't mistakes, they're strategy. While the numbers tell their story, your ride tells yours. Check the description for the gear and accessories that keep every mile honest. Dealers on the hot seat. When the leak hit full force, the pressure didn't land only on corporate offices. It landed on the showrooms across the country. Local dealers who'd spent decades building community suddenly faced riders demanding answers. Some owners stood tall, admitting that corporate pricing policies left them little room to maneuver. They talked about rent, payroll, shipping, and rising costs. Others tried to deflect, claiming the leaks were misunderstood or incomplete. But riders who'd seen the documents weren't buying excuses. In small towns, the relationships between riders and shop owners ran deep. There were people who'd known each other since the 70s, who shared rides, barbecues, and funerals. To have those bonds tested over hidden margins felt personal. A retired mechanic in Ohio summed it up best. "We used to sell iron and friendship. Now it's spreadsheets that one line spread across forums like a banner." Corporate stores, often backed by investor groups, took a colder stance. They defended margins as part of modern retail reality, pointing to inflation, supply chain disruptions, and brand costs. But for loyal customers, it sounded hollow. The trust that once filled those showrooms now echoed with doubt. Some dealers quietly agreed that the system had gone too far. They remembered when the brand's survival depended on mutual respect, not market strategy. Those who spoke candidly risked losing favor with headquarters but gained respect from riders who still valued honesty. This tension between profit and pride became the new face of Harley's business. What started as a data leak turned into a moral question. When did heritage start taking a backseat to margin? Riders who once argued about chrome versus matte now argued about ethics. The revelation had shifted from numbers to meaning, and those spreadsheets just rewrote the rules of loyalty inside the incentive game. After the leak, riders began digging deeper into what those dealer sheets really meant. It wasn't just about the base cost of a motorcycle, it was about the hidden mechanics behind every sale. Buried among the files were factory memos and internal bulletins describing something few outside the business had ever seen. Incentive programs that paid bonuses to dealers who moved certain models or hit specific monthly targets. The rewards weren't small. They included cash payouts, marketing reimbursements, and access to limited edition stock reserved for top performers. That meant dealers had reasons to push some bikes harder than others, regardless of what suited the rider. The more high-margin machines they sold, the more bonuses flowed back from the factory. It turned the showroom from a place of trust into a numbers game. Suddenly, every great deal had strings attached. Sales staff were trained to lead buyers toward models that earned the best margin, or toward accessories that carried near total profit. Chrome packages, extended warranties, branded gear. Every add-on was part of the ladder. Even service plans were tied to quotas. What looked like choice was often strategy. Veteran riders began connecting dots that never made sense before. Why did some dealers discourage ordering base models? Why did certain colors vanish unless you upgraded the package? Now the reasons were clear. Each decision was guided by corporate incentive math, not rider need. It was business efficiency disguised as enthusiasm. Suddenly, that push for chrome trim and extended warranties makes sense. The margin divide, tourers versus cruisers. Once riders understood the incentive system, they turned their attention to how profit was spread across the lineup. The assumption had always been that the big touring bikes, the road glides, the ultras, the limiteds, brought in the most money. They carried the highest sticker prices and the flashiest options. But the leaked records told a different story. Those large tourers often had the thinnest profit percentages, sometimes only 8 or 9% after freight and prep. The real profit came from smaller and mid-range bikes, the cruisers, the lowriders, the softails. They cost less to buy from the factory, but sold for a far higher multiple over invoice. One mid-size cruiser could bring in as much cash as a touring model priced almost $10,000 higher. That flipped decades of assumptions on their head. For older riders who traded up through the lineup, it was frustrating to see that the bikes they associated with premium quality actually rewarded dealers the least. It explained why some showrooms seemed reluctant to discount big tourers, or why smaller models were pushed so hard during sales events. The math dictated the message. The idea that a stripped-down cruiser might keep the lights on while a top-tier touring rig barely broke even didn't fit Harley's public story. Corporate ads spoke about the flagship machines leading the legacy, defining the brand, and setting the standard for American touring. But behind closed doors, those icons had become marketing tools. Prestige anchors meant to make the mid-tier bikes look like bargains. Riders began comparing this approach to grocery store tactics. Draw you in with a premium product, then profit from everything around it. The emotional pull of heritage had been turned into a sales funnel. And yet, corporate messaging keeps saying the big bikes lead the brand. The corporate script and the shop floor reality. While the numbers told one story, the voices inside the business told another. Dealers, sales managers, and techs began to share what they'd been hearing from corporate training sessions. According to several staff accounts, Harley's modern sales playbook focused less on product knowledge and more on perceived value, a marketing term that encouraged selling lifestyle first, price second. One dealer described how reps were trained to steer conversations away from invoices or markups entirely. Instead, they were told to emphasize the feeling of belonging, the exclusivity of ownership, and the cost of missing out. That language didn't come from grease-stained service bays. It came from boardrooms. The entire narrative had shifted from craftsmanship to image control. But for people on the shop floor, that script clashed with reality. Mechanics knew the cost of every bolt. Salespeople knew the margins. And longtime staff who'd watched the business evolve couldn't stomach the growing gap between truth and pitch. It's hard to talk heritage, one employee admitted anonymously, when the training manual reads like a retail seminar. The old hands missed when a Harley sold itself, when torque, weight, and feel were enough to close a deal. Now they were told to upsell experiences and memberships, bundle accessories, and reframe objections. It felt like the language of appliance sales, not motorcycling. Riders who heard these confessions saw their suspicions confirmed. What they'd felt intuitively, that the company had started selling an identity rather than an engine, was now fact. The story from the podium no longer matched the story told behind the counter, and riders could sense it every time a salesman used the word community instead of horsepower. Because the story told at the podium doesn't match the one told behind the counter. Riders crunched the numbers. After months of leaks, spreadsheets, and back-channel talk, the riders themselves took control of the investigation. Forums began filling with shared invoices and dealership quotes. Spreadsheet templates circulated online, allowing buyers to plug in model names and see what percentage of the price likely went to markup. What started as anger evolved into analysis. Seasoned riders with backgrounds in finance, trucking, and mechanics began collaborating. They created side-by-side charts showing how freight, setup, and documentation fees inflated prices across regions. The patterns were undeniable. The same touring bike that cost a dealer $21,000 in Ohio might list at $27,000 in California, before taxes or registration. It proved that markup wasn't uniform. It was strategy shaped by local demand and corporate guidance. Frustration turned to pride as riders uncovered the truth. Garage Talk became a national audit, and honest dealers saw sales rebound. Corporate warned against disclosure, but transparency spread fast. Riders realized they'd funded an empire, and now the empire answered to them. The balance of power had shifted, but transparency online soon turned into confrontation in the showrooms. Dealerships split down the middle. When the truth about pricing spread, the first cracks didn't appear on factory floors or in boardrooms. They appeared inside the dealerships themselves. Across the country, longtime owners who had sold bikes for generations found themselves at odds with the new breed of managers trained by corporate programs. The divide wasn't just about money, it was about meaning. The old guard believed motorcycles were relationships built one handshake at a time. The new school treated them as data points and quarterly goals. Tension rose in meetings where tradition met spreadsheets. Some dealers wanted to roll back markups to rebuild trust. Others argued that the modern buyer expects fees and adjustments. The veterans shook their heads, muttering that you can't sell soul by the quarter. It was more than nostalgia. It was pride in how business used to be done, when loyalty lasted longer than the warranty period. Riders felt the divide instantly. Some shops smelled of coffee and loyalty, others of sales scripts. The difference was soul. Passion versus profit split the floor, and Harley's brotherhood began to fray, not from rivals, but from within its own walls. That split didn't stay inside the offices. Riders could feel it. Riders vote with their wallets. Once the story spread, the customers didn't stage protests or flood social media. They simply stopped signing papers. In the months that followed, deposits on new bikes dipped, while used listings skyrocketed. Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, and local swap meets filled with older Harleys commanding prices few expected. A 2006 Road King that might have sat unsold a year earlier was now moving faster than a new model. The reason was simple: trust. Riders began seeing the machines of the early 2000s as symbols of an era before marketing took over. Those bikes were heavier, louder, sometimes less refined, but they were built with a kind of honesty the new price sheets seemed to erase. Owners who had held on to them were suddenly vindicated. They weren't clinging to the past, they had preserved it. Dealers felt the chill, bright showrooms, fewer buyers. Riders kept old tourers alive, fueling a quiet rebellion through repairs, not trade-ins. Independent shops thrived as trust shifted back to the garage. It wasn't outrage but discipline. Thousands simply walked away, proving silence can hit harder than protest. And that quiet resistance hit harder than any protest. If you believe real riders deserve real answers, subscribe now. Every week we uncover what's happening behind the chrome and the corporate slogans, giving you the insight to protect your wallet, your pride, and the miles that still matter. Heritage under pressure. As sales cooled and used bikes gained new glory, Harley faced an identity crisis deeper than numbers. For more than a century, the company had sold freedom, independence, and pride. Every ad, every chrome line, every rumbling V-twin carried that promise. But when riders saw that the company treated its own customers as data points, the message cracked. A brand once built on brotherhood now felt like a balance sheet. Older riders spoke with sadness more than anger. They remembered walking into dealerships where trust was unspoken. A handshake meant a fair deal, and loyalty wasn't a punchline. It was how business was done. Many recalled riding home from the lot feeling like part of something bigger, not like a line on a spreadsheet. That memory now stood in sharp contrast to modern showrooms plastered with buzzwords about lifestyle and experience. Harley forgot its legacy was earned, not advertised. The myth came from miles, repairs, and friendships, not marketing. Riders reignited pride in their old machines, not new slogans. The brand could adjust prices or paint, but authenticity once lost can't be bought back, No chrome can polish a faded soul. Competitors noticed, and they moved fast. Rivals smell opportunity. As Harley wrestled with its public image, other manufacturers sensed an opening. Indian, long seen as the underdog, launched a campaign centered on one simple promise: transparent pricing. Every ad highlighted honesty and simplicity. What you see is what you pay. It was a subtle jab, but riders caught it immediately. Forums filled with comments from longtime Harley owners admitting they were curious enough to ride something different. Japanese brands followed quickly, adjusting their marketing to emphasize value over image. Yamaha and Honda highlighted their consistent reliability and straightforward financing. Even smaller import brands began using words like integrity, clarity, and no surprises. These companies weren't just selling motorcycles, they were selling contrast. Every message whispered the same challenge: we won't treat you like you can't read a receipt. By late 2025, Indian gained ground while Harley reacted, not led. Milwaukee promised restored confidence, but riders wanted proof, not slogans. Loyalty thinned as transparency lagged. The Rebel brand had become the establishment, and rivals claimed its spirit. The fight wasn't for power anymore, it was for honesty. And once the market shifts, the regulators are never far behind. Transparency on the table. When the noise of leaks, forums, and price charts finally reached the offices of lawmakers, the tone changed. For the first time, consumer protection groups began asking the same questions riders had been asking for years. If a manufacturer can dictate how a dealer sells a motorcycle, then shouldn't the buyer know exactly what's being paid at every step? It wasn't an attack on Harley alone. It was a signal that the market itself might be overdue for a reckoning. Lawmakers proposed rules for clear invoices and disclosed fees. Honesty turned into policy. Trade groups warned transparency would confuse buyers, but riders laughed. We're not confused by numbers, just hidden ones. A retired Harley owner put it best: we don't mind the price, only the secrets behind it. Even Washington's starting to sound like the back corner of a garage forum. Market reactions and investor panic. As whispers of new disclosure laws spread, Wall Street finally looked up from its spreadsheets. Analysts who once treated Harley as a stable dividend stock began warning that its pricing model was too fragile to survive under full transparency. If the public knew how much profit sat between the factory floor and the sales desk, they argued, demand could flatten overnight. Harley's share price dipped, not because of lost riders, but because of shaken confidence among investors who suddenly realized how dependent the brand had become on perception. Dealers started trimming orders quietly, not out of rebellion, but caution. They didn't want to sit on expensive inventory if pricing rules changed mid-year. Factory output projections tightened. Suppliers were asked to hold steady on materials until clearer guidance came through. Inside Harley's corporate offices, executives framed the shift as a temporary adjustment. But for those who'd been watching since the leaks began, it looked more like correction than coincidence. Reporters called it a market pause, but it was a reckoning. Riders weren't leaving, they were redefining loyalty. Investors saw trust mattered more than margins. Through the turmoil, riders stayed humble, wanting Harley to remember its roots. Because a brand that forgets who built it eventually forgets why it mattered. Because when Wall Street flinches, something deeper is shifting. The factory floor reality. While the executives managed earnings calls and analysts dissected forecasts, life on the factory floor continued. Steady, proud, and complicated. Inside the assembly lines of Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, the welders, machinists, and painters showed up every morning with the same sense of duty they'd carried for decades. They weren't thinking about margins or shareholder confidence. They were thinking about steel alignment, weld penetration, and finish tolerances. They built the bikes that carried Harley through wars and recessions, untouched by corporate spin. When orders slowed, pride endured. One foreman said, "We still weld integrity even when accounting doesn't." That spirit proved craftsmanship outlasts profit, reminding everyone Harley's real strength was forged, not financed. Harley's name wasn't built in conference rooms. It was built on factory floors by hands that knew metal better than numbers. And those hands, steady and scarred, still believed that honesty in work mattered more than profit on paper. And that pride, not the markup, is what built Harley's name in the first place. Taking back the rider's advantage. Out in the garages and forums, the energy had shifted. What began as outrage had turned into education. Riders weren't just sharing stories anymore. They were sharing strategies. Posts detailed how to read a dealer invoice, how to identify redundant fees, and how to time a purchase near the end of a sales quarter when dealers were most flexible. It became a new kind of brotherhood, one built not on rebellion against the machine, but on mastery of the system that sells it. Experienced riders taught newcomers to ask for itemized costs before signing anything. They shared scripts for negotiating setup fees, warned against unnecessary accessories, and encouraged pre-purchase inspections by independent mechanics. Knowledge became armor. For the first time in years, riders felt they had leverage again, not through shouting or boycotts, but through calm, informed confidence. Riders changed the market with calm resolve, proving loyalty means accountability, not blind faith. Harley may own the brand, but riders own the miles. Through honesty and endurance, they reclaim trust, and the sound of a real engine still reminds them, every horizon is earned, not sold. The truth's out, and now it's your turn to ride smarter. If this deep dive opened your eyes to what's really happening behind the chrome, hit that like button to keep the story alive. Subscribe for more hard-hitting breakdowns that cut through the noise, and drop a comment below. Tell me what you've seen at your local dealer, what shocked you most, or what Harley means to you now.